Let me first of all agree with Mitch. There's a lot of things. Let's take the double-edged sword of ACA. You would not have the innovation and people taking kind of some of the risks around gig if you hadn't disconnected health coverage
You really
from
think
work
so?
steps. Yes. Now, the flip side of that is there were a lot of things in ACA that were totally screwed up. 30-hour cliffs and a whole host of others. But let me go to the point on capitalism. And again, I spent longer as a business guy than I have in politics.
We should remind people that
20 plus
very
years,
successful.
co-founder of Nextel, venture guy, telecom. But the capitalism that I grew up with is different than the capitalism of today. And I think this is a creature of government policy. 45, 50 years ago, average tenure of hold of public stock was 8 years. Today it's 4 months. 30 years ago, 50% of corporate profits, public company profits, were reinvested in their business. Today, 95% are stock buybacks and dividends. Tell me something's not screwy with capitalism when iconic American companies with hundreds of billions of dollars on their balance sheet borrow money to do stock buybacks. That's not capitalism. That is financial manipulation of a system, and that is partially driven by government policy. The corporation is an entity of the state. It is a creature of the state. What it is, one way or the other, the state can determine. I think, and I think there have been slow changes in this. Responsibility, again, particularly around public corporates, is value to shareholders, but also to other constituencies, your employees, your communities, elsewhere.
But shouldn't the blowback of that come from the shareholders themselves and not from government?
I think that listen, we have, and I would agree, big government static is becoming less trusted, less nimble, less effective. Globalization, technology, AI, and short-termism, a short-termism now that didn't exist 30 years ago, or even 20 years ago, is saying how to become more and more effective. And the first thing that's eliminated is human capital. Now, good skilled workers, they're going to be fine. The folks you're hiring are going to be fine. Low and moderate income Americans, enormous disruption and displacement. I mean, just think about the terminology. You invest in a piece of equipment, that's an asset. You invest in the kind of training that Zoe's talking about, just on your balance sheet, that's a cost. All I'm saying is somebody who wants capitalism to work, we need to slightly shift the emphasis so that reinvesting in human capital is a little higher on the food chain. And I would argue, and I don't want to take too much time here, but there are a series of things, both public and private, that can happen. There is a series of public efforts, because I do believe millennials want to work for and buy from responsible companies. Public series of efforts that government will have nothing to do with. They're going to try to find what are those metrics. The Paul Tudor Jones with Just Capital, the B Corp movement that Zoe's so familiar with, the Sustainability Index, inclusive capitalism, conscientious capital, a whole series of movements. I do think there are a series that government can be involved in around corporate governance. I do believe differential capital gains rate based on longer-term holds, more incentives for patient capital, maybe even corporate governance rules that say longer-term additional voting powers for longer-term holds on corporate stocks. And there are absolutely things that public policymakers can do, particularly around training. Candidly, the folks at EY and everyone kind of further up, I think they will sort through. Everybody under $75,000 pay as a cut line in this country. I am very worried that they're on the chopping block, and the investment criteria of a company investing in those people, we have to figure out, because government, again, I would agree, doesn't do a great job on this. How do we incent that public or private entity to actually invest in that person, even if that person moves around? Maybe part of the tail on that benefit goes a year out. There's going to have to be, I think, a lot of creative thinking here, or if not, the Sanders, Trump, Brexit anger. And we don't have well, we just got to reform education for the next 20 years. We don't have the luxury of another generation to figure this out. This needs to have a greater sense of urgency than, frankly, what I deal with on my day job.